First Things, episode number 7.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. Today, we are talking about multitasking. So, hang on a second. I just got a text. No. I have a show right now I need to do. Okay. All right. So anyway, where was I? Yeah. So today we're doing this thing about multitasking. Oh, I just got this face. Oh gosh, that was funny. Anyway, multitasking is what we're all about today. Yeah. Okay. So, oh man, that is a cool email. Oh gosh. Anyway, where was I? Today we're talking about multitasking. Yes. This concept isn't without controversy. We want to dive into some of the research, make some honest assessments about multitasking. Some of it may surprise you, and always dive into some action steps at the end. I want to welcome all new listeners and also let you know that the last episode on happiness really took off. I was shocked how much it took off. In fact, in just 1 week, it has become my most downloaded episode. As I mentioned in that episode, that show was just a teaser on the topic because I was so excited about some of the stuff I was researching on this particular topic. And I'm finishing up a lot of research on this right now, and I hope to return to that topic with a lot more details in a few weeks. My initial thought is that there's going to be so much material, we're probably going to end up covering it over 2 to 3 episodes at least. Okay, so let me get focused now. Okay, so today, the myth of multitasking, or is it? What's the truth about this? Because you read a lot of different stuff, and to be honest with you, there's a lot of stuff out there that can sometimes be used to sell you some books on it. I want to give you my honest assessment on this based upon research and give some action steps, as always. I don't think we really need a definition for multitasking, but just in case, this simply means the ability to work on more than one task at a time, and many researchers suggest that the word origin stems more from computers, which can do multiple things at one time. And I want to first talk about the research on this, which is mostly bad news for people who want to multitask, but I want to then talk about some contradictions to this research, which you don't often hear people talk about, and then try to find a balance between the two views. So first of all, the research. There is a wealth of research which basically says that multitasking doesn't work. So here's a few of them. Now, social scientists have long assumed that it's impossible to process more than one string of information at a time. The brain just can't do it. So let's say you have a thought like this. You're driving home from work. I need to make sure I take the garbage out today and also be sure to send that email to Bill about the social next Thursday. And at the same time, you have another thought dominating your head. It's my wife's birthday next week, and she's really been dropping hints about wanting some jewelry. Now, we don't think those simultaneously. In fact, try that right now. Try to think 2 thoughts at the same moment in time. You can't do it. And we don't also mix them up. I mean, we don't in our heads think, I need to, my wife's birthday, take out the garbage next week. She's really been wanting to send that email about wanting some jewelry to Bill about the social. We just don't do that. Instead, our minds switch back and forth. So here's how it might sound like in your head. I need to make sure I take the garbage out today. Oh, yeah, it's my wife's birthday next week. Oh, yeah, be sure to send that email to Bill about the social next Thursday. She's really been dropping some hints about wanting some jewelry. We can only think one thought at a time, although we switch between many thoughts all the time. Next week, we will talk about how this is a really good thing, but for this week, it is something that works against us. Renee Maros from Vanderbilt University says this: our research offers neurological evidence that the brain cannot effectively do two things at once. Maros has used MRI scans to demonstrate the brain responds differently when trying to handle multiple tasks. Maros found evidence of a response selection bottleneck that occurs when your brain is forced to respond to several stimuli at once. As a result, our brains have to switch back and forth between tasks, which leads time loss because the brain has to determine which task to perform. So our brain works naturally by switch tasking, not multitasking. That is how our brains are not like computers. We have a powerful processor in our brain, but it works by one thing at a time. Now, this switching can be so fast that it seems instant, but it really isn't. And I'll give you some examples in this show that remind us of this. This is why interruptions are so devastating to us for productivity. We talked about this at length in a previous podcast on unleashing the lion in your brain, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. Psychologist David Meyer at the University of Michigan believes that with training, the brain can learn to task switch more effectively. And there is some evidence that certain simple tasks are receptive to such practices, but more on that in a bit. But his research has also found that multitasking contributes to the release of stress hormones and adrenaline, which can actually cause long-term health problems if not controlled, and contributes to the loss of short-term memory. Clifford Nass of Stanford University has said this: the people who multitask most frequently think they're actually the best at it, and in fact, they're the worst at it. In fact, all the evidence we have suggests the people who multitask the most actually are the least capable of any important aspect of multitasking. There's another study at Stanford by Eyal Ofer. Ofer says this: we kept looking for what multitaskers were better at, and we didn't find it. In each of their tests, researchers did this. They split the subjects into two groups: those who regularly did a lot of media multitasking and those who didn't. In one experiment, the groups were shown sets of two red rectangles alone and then surrounded by 2, 4, 6 blue rectangles. Each configuration was flashed twice to them, and the participants had to determine whether the two red rectangles in the second frame were any different position than they were in the first frame. Now, they were told to ignore the blue rectangles, and the low multitaskers had no problem doing that. But the high multitaskers were constantly distracted by those irrelevant blue images, and their performance was horrible. Because the high multitaskers showed that they couldn't ignore things, the researchers figured, hey, they're better at storing and organizing information. Maybe they have better memories. The second test proved that theory completely wrong. After being shown sequences of alphabetical letters, the high multitaskers did a lousy job at remembering when a letter was making a repeat appearance. Ofer says this: the low multitaskers did great. The high multitaskers were doing worse and worse the further they went along because they kept seeing more letters and had difficulty keeping them sorted in their brains. Dr. Edward Hallowell, who's a Massachusetts psychiatrist, wrote a great book called Crazy Busy, writes a lot about attention deficit disorders. He has been offering therapies to combat extreme multitasking for years. In his book, he actually calls multitasking the mythical activity in which people believe they can perform two or more tasks simultaneously. In 2005, he wrote an article where he described a new condition called attention deficit trait, which he claims is rampant in the business world. Attention deficit trait, according to him, mimics symptoms of attention deficit disorder, ADD. Limiting multitasking is essential, according to him. This is also mimicked in the best-selling advice author Timothy Ferriss, who extols what he calls single tasking in his book, The 4-Hour Workweek. In a recent study, Russell Poldrack, a psychology professor at the University of California, found this: multitasking adversely affects how you learn. Even if you learn while multitasking, that learning is less flexible and more specialized, so you cannot retrieve the information as easily. His research also demonstrates that people use different areas of the brain for learning and storing information when they are distracted. When we multitask, we are not using the part of our brain called the hippocampus, a region involved in storing and recalling information. Now, in an interview, he said this: "We have to be aware that there is a cost to the way that our society is changing, that humans are not built to work this way. We're really meant to focus, and when we sort of force ourselves to multitask, we're driving ourselves to perhaps be less efficient in the long run, even though it sometimes feels like we're being more efficient." Now, the research is almost unanimous, which is very rare in social science. I will tell you that from experience. It says that people who chronically multitask show an enormous range of deficits. They're basically terrible at all sorts of cognitive tasks, including multitasking itself. And just because someone may attempt to multitask all the time doesn't mean they can overcome the negatives with constant use, any more than saying you smoke all the time makes you immune to the consequences of smoking. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. So why does multitasking seem so enticing? Because it does. A lot of people want to do it, and we're tempted to do it all the time. Well, some research suggests that it provides us with a type of coping that we become dependent upon. A study at Ohio State University showed that people tended to attempt multitasking when they were approaching cognitively challenging tasks, like studying, and pair the difficult task with easier ones like checking email or continuing an instant message conversation. The result is this: you feel more emotionally stimulated, and you're triggering your pleasure centers in your brain, but the brain actually misallocates that emotional pleasure received as being productive, even as your effectiveness declines. So you think you're more productive than you really are, and it becomes like a feedback loop. If you multitask today, you're going to be likely to do it tomorrow, and further strengthening that behavior over time. By the way, there's a great video by National Geographic doing experiments on a guy who claimed to be a multitasker. It's very interesting to watch. I'll put up a link in the show notes. I would encourage you to watch the whole thing, but listen to this small clip as they give him the news of the results.
With the test complete, Dr. Strayer is ready to give Petrus the answer as to how he ranks as a multitasker.
Well, the good news is you're just like 98% of the rest of the people. You're like for driving performance, you got worse when you started to multitask, and the conversation task got worse when you're multitasking as well.
I think I'll put the cell phone a bit further away.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. It's been the most fun day.
Okay, good.
Despite Petrus's conviction that he's an efficient multitasker, his final scores turned out to be about average.
Now, I can hear somebody say, wait, can't I chew gum and walk at the same time? Can't I listen to music or podcasts and drive a car at the same time? I mean, come on, Brandon. I'm doing this right now. Well, if you are, then please drive carefully. But we all know this. You can't really do anything and drive. I mean, how many accidents and deaths have been caused by texting and driving? Studies show that text messaging makes a crash up to 23 times more likely. And you say, okay, Brandon, but that isn't the same thing as listening to music and driving or chewing gum and walking at the same time. And this may surprise you, but I do agree with that line of reasoning. I do think there is merit there. I would still suggest that the more mental an activity is, the greater the distraction. But, okay, how do we balance research with actual contradictions that we notice in our lives, like cooking supper while talking to someone on the telephone? So here are my conclusions. After all of that, when it comes to things involving motor skills, which means things you physically do, it is possible to multitask. That is why you can drive and listen to music. Driving is a physical activity. Here is where I would suggest that most research you hear on multitasking is focused more on mental activities than physical ones. However, it takes a long time to master this, so don't expect to master the guitar while watching television. To master anything requires intention, no matter if it's physical or mental. Now, after you've mastered the guitar, then sure, you can try watching TV, cooking dinner, and playing guitar at the same time. But you have to be willing to just be average in the physical task at hand, or be willing to make mistakes. If you decide to do this, don't expect you will be anything other than average. When I play guitar, and do something else, I will be a little sloppy because I'm not devoting my full attention to what I'm doing. It sounds okay, but when I start focusing in on what I'm doing, I realize I'm making a lot of minor mistakes here and there. So if you're okay with average, if you're okay with making mistakes, then fine. But remember, the enemy of the best is the good. And this really only applies after you've mastered the task at hand. At any point, a mental cognitive task may so overwhelm that the physical task has to be stopped, or vice versa. Has this ever happened to you? You are in the car listening to an audiobook or podcast or music, and then comes a horrendous thunderstorm. Road conditions become dangerous, the road's barely visible, people start driving stupid ahead of you. What do? Do you turn up the radio and drive faster? Well, here's what I do. I turn it down or turn off the radio and focus, slow down and focus. Why? Why do I do that? I mean, I've driven for over 20 years of my life. Don't I have some mastery of driving? Well, some people may think otherwise, but I think I have some level of mastery of driving. I've been doing it forever, it seems. But that isn't the point. Even in skills I have mastered, conditions don't always allow me to do more than one thing without consequences. So sure, I can play guitar while watching YouTube, but if Paul McCartney asked me to audition for his band, do you think I would do that while watching YouTube? No way. I'm going to focus. I'm going to not be sloppy. I'm not wanting to be average in a situation like that. The tasks that seem to become automatic with practice, like juggling or playing an instrument or driving, are part of motor memory, muscle memory, where we generate patterns of behavior in our brains. These become almost like a reflex. And the science, is that we use these parts of our brain, the cerebellum and the brainstem, mediate this motor action. And that's probably a better explanation as to why we can eat and read or other things like that. Different parts of the brain are active. However, reading and writing simultaneously, not so effective. Now, when it comes to mental skills, this is the bad news. Your brain isn't capable or developed enough to do more than one thing at a time. Now, I want to show you this. I've often asked you to take tests for me on this program. And today, I'm going to be the guinea pig. I am going to be the one who has the experiment done on him. This is totally unscripted. I have no idea of the results, although I have an idea of what the results are going to be, but I'm honestly going to try to do this correctly and to be fair about this. So here's what I'm going to do. And you can try this later yourself. I am simply going to spell out firstthingsproductivity.com, which is my website. And that's simple enough, right? firstthingsproductivity.com. Simple task. But there's another task I want to do at the same time. And that is I want to count up from 1 to 25. Another really simple task, right? I mean, these are so easy, a third grader could do them. I have my trusty iPhone right here, upgraded to the recent iOS 7, by the way, ready to help me record my time. So I'm going to start it, and then when you start hearing me talk, I've actually started the timer. F1, I2, R3, S4, T5, T6, H7, I8, N9, G10, S11, P12, R13, O14, D15, U16, C17, T18, I19, V20, I21, T22, Y23, dot 24, C25, 0, O 26, M27. Okay. You probably listen to this and I probably skipped some letters or numbers. So my time for that was 43.16 seconds. Now, I'm going to do the same thing, but instead of switching back and forth, I'm simply going to do one thing at a time. So here I go. FIRSTTINGSPRODUCTIVITY.com 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. All right. Whew, out of breath. 14.04 seconds. So I went from 43 seconds to 14 seconds on this experiment. Now, that is almost 30 seconds longer and well more than twice the length of that. So I didn't do a very good job at multitasking in that particular situation. Now, just for fun, I'm going to do the same single task, but this time I'm going to do a physical activity. I'm going to rub my stomach. And to make it more challenging, I'm going to rub my stomach in as uniform motion as I can. So I want to concentrate on keeping the same speed throughout. I don't want to get faster or slower. So I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to try to make sure I don't speed up as I go through this. Okay, so here I go. FIRSTTINGSPRODUCTIVITY.com 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. All right. 16.0 seconds. 16.07 seconds. All right, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to rub my stomach. I'm going to say all this stuff, singular task, but this time I'm not going to worry about how fast or slow I rub my stomach. So if I speed up or slow down, I don't really care. Okay, so here I go. FIRSTTINGSPRODUCTIVITY.com 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Okay, so I did that in about 13.71 seconds. So I actually did it slightly faster rubbing my stomach than I did when I wasn't. But notice I did it when I was intentionally rubbing my stomach in a uniform fashion, 16.07 seconds. This one, 13.71 seconds. So I was actually more productive when I wasn't trying to focus on that physical activity. Can you see in this simple example how switching made the two tasks longer than simply focusing on one at a time? And even when I was trying to do something physical and I had to concentrate on that while I was doing this, it had a small impact in this. And try this yourself. See if you are better. By the way, I've done this experiment with actual college students, and I'll be honest, I've had 1 or 2 students come up and do better when they were switching. And I always wondered if they were just being truthful with me, being mischievous, or maybe if they'd actually done it backwards. But if they were truthful, for every 2 students that do it better, 98 do it worse. So although my little experiment I would not regard as ironclad proof of anything, I think it does show me that for me, I'm better off with a singular task. How about you? Try it yourself and see. Now, we've already demonstrated that you can't do 2 mental activities at the same time. You can't think 2 thoughts at exactly the same time. We switch tasks instead. There may be one instance in which switch tasking might prove okay. There is one thing that most research does fail to study, and that is mental activities that have the same focus. So our brains can actually receive many stimuli at one time, but they must have a common focus for our productivity to not be effective. The problem with switch tasking is not that we're writing a report on Abraham Lincoln and we see pictures of Abraham Lincoln and we read words by Abraham Lincoln all while we're writing the paper. All of that's related. The problem is when we're doing a report on Abraham Lincoln and tweeting about last night and watching a YouTube video about cats playing the piano. That's where we get into the problem. That's where the detriment comes in. It's extremely healthy for your brain to do integrative things. It's extremely destructive for your brain to do non-integrative things. So you get an instant message from your boss asking you for the sales figures from last quarter and what the current effect is on stock prices. You may be writing your boss, pulling up the Excel file with the data while doing a Google search on stock price. It is a common focus, a common purpose, a common theme. I still think for most people, you're faster, more productive, just focusing on one task at a time. But okay, you can make that work for you because it's a common thing. But you get an IM from your boss and your friend texts you while you're trying to finish up a PowerPoint presentation before 10, all of it unrelated, non-integrated, and this is what the research is so overwhelmingly clear: you can't do it. And to do it destroys your efficiency, productivity, and time. So what does all this mean? Here's basically the summary of this. When people say that multitasking is a myth, for the most part, it is true, especially for mental tasks. Instead, what you end up doing is switch tasking. Multitasking involves engaging in two tasks simultaneously, but here's the catch. It's only possible if two conditions are met. One, at least one of those tasks is so well learned as to be automatic, meaning no focus or thought is necessary to engage in that task, like walking or eating. And two, they involve different types of brain processing. So, for example, you can read effectively while listening to classical music because reading comprehension and processing instrumental music engage different parts of the brain. However, your ability to retain information while reading and listening to music with lyrics declines significantly because both tasks activate the language center of the brain. Think of it like this. Mental activities are like bullies to your brain. Bullies. They don't play well with other mental activities, and they may tolerate physical activities provided they don't get in the way. The more important the task, the more focus your brain demands. Physical activities are much easier to multitask after mastery, if you're okay with average performance. For the automatic, we need predictable situations. So, for example, when you're driving a car, we can't have the car suddenly start accelerating without us wanting it to. Or weather conditions produce unpredictability that demand our attention. It would be the same as, again, me playing the guitar and possibly it starts going out of tune the more I play. Well, that's a distraction that takes away from the automatic ability to do other things. So you need a fair amount of predictability, not spontaneity. When you combine two physical or a physical and a mental activity, multitasking may be possible. But be ready for mediocre average productivity. And if you really want to multitask when working, get a standing desk and put a treadmill under it. Then you can walk and work at the same time. But don't attempt two mental activities at the same time. It just won't work. The only exception is when mental activities have the same focus. Otherwise, switch tasking never works. So I think a better way to say this, instead of saying multitasking is a myth, would be to say that multitasking for the sake of efficiency and productivity is a myth. For physical activities, you lose efficiency and effectiveness. For mental activities, multitasking is only realized through switch tasking, and you lose all productivity, often doubling or tripling the time to do the same task. Imagine you're at your job, working on several projects, and I ask you how long it's going to take you. You tell me about 3 hours. And then I ask you, how much would you pay me if I could show you how to do that in 1.5 hours instead? How much would that be worth for you? And here, right now, I've just given you the biggest secret to make that happen. Quit trying to multitask. What if you told me you were trying to excel at something like learning a foreign language or learning a musical instrument or golf or whatever, and I were to tell you that I could cut your learning time in half? How much would that be worth for you? And here, right now, I've just given you the biggest secret to make that happen. Quit trying to multitask. So now I want to switch over into 8 action steps that you can start doing today to minimize multitasking effects and negativity on your life. Number 1, don't just take my word for it. Do experiments on yourself. Make this fun. The test that I did earlier, it's a very simple test. Do it yourself and honestly see which one you do better on. But do more than that. Take a task that you normally do with multitasking and time yourself. Do it with multitasking. Then the following week, do it again, but turn off all distractions and just focus on that one thing and honestly see how different your life is. See how different your productivity is. Also, do some research. Read some of the research articles on this. If you are that 1 in a million person who can really multitask anything with great efficiency, well, then let me know. I would love to meet you. But honestly, I think we're delusional if we think we can do this. But test yourself, honestly, and see. Number 2, weigh the cost. There's an ancient proverb that says this: if you chase 2 rabbits, you will not catch either one. And I love that quote. There's also another quote by Lord Chesterfield back in the 1740s. I think he was writing to his son. And he said this: there is time enough for everything in the course of the day if you do but one thing at once. But there is not time enough in the year if you will do 2 things at a time. That may be a little bit extreme, but I do think you need to weigh the cost. You should ask yourself, is average okay? So I'm doing this task. Is average okay? Is mediocrity okay? Will it be worth doing more than one thing at once if it takes me twice as long to do both? I mean, honestly, if you want to try to work on your PowerPoint presentation and surf Facebook at the same time, is it worth it taking you 1.5 hours to do the PowerPoint presentation versus 1 hour to do both individually? I mean, think about this. You could do both of them back and forth more for 1.5 hours, or you can focus in on your PowerPoint presentation, get it done in 30 minutes, and then have 30 minutes to focus on Facebook posting, and you will have only spent an hour and you will still have saved 30 minutes. So is it worth that extra 30 minutes to do both of them at the same time? And that's an honest question you should ask yourself. Am I willing to devote isolated, dedicated time to so master a task, preferably a physical one, so that I can do it without thinking? Is multitasking worth me devoting the next 6 months to focus, practice for 2 hours every single day to master this skill to enable multitasking? Now, for me, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend the next 6 months, a couple of hours a day trying to master something just so I can multitask. It's so much easier just to single task. I can get a lot more done with less work, greater efficiency. Now, some people might be afraid to turn loose on multitasking because to say you're not doing it sounds almost like you're saying, I don't want to be productive and get the most use out of my time. You have to keep reminding yourself that intentionally focusing on one thing is actually producing the very thing you want: more productivity, less time, and greater efficiency. Number 3, does your job really demand you attempt switch tasking? Now, there are some jobs that might, but more often than not, even sometimes when we think it's necessary, it isn't. Be honest about this too. There are very few jobs that require you to focus on unrelated things at the same time. Remember, I'm not talking about integrated aspects of the same thing. So if you are an emergency operator, you're talking to the caller and typing on the computer to dispatch at the same time, well, it might be more efficient if 2 people were doing that, but I'm not saying that isn't important to do in your job, nor am I saying that you can't learn to do both things at the same time. The research really isn't focused so much on that, but more on competing tasks. So all I'm saying is that you can't take an emergency call and be posting on Facebook at the same time. But think about that. Would you want an emergency operator talking to you who's also texting his kids at the same time? No, you wouldn't want that. If not, don't you think your task and jobs are just as important to demand your full respect and attention? Number 4, when you have a choice, limit yourself. Listen to this excerpt from an interview with author Gina Trampini, and I will post a link to this in the show notes as well.
A human's ability to do several things at once, it's a wonder of biology. It means we can eat a burrito while we walk down the street and listen to music and daydream about the weekend, all at the same time. But some kinds of multitasking costs us more time than we save. Doing 2 things at once, like singing while you're taking a shower, is not the same as instant messaging while you're writing a research report. Don't fool yourself into thinking you're actually having a conversation while you write. You're switching your attention back and forth between 2 tasks quickly. You're juggling. And when you juggle tasks, your work suffers and it takes longer because switching tasks takes time. When your brain switches from one task to another, it takes up a whole new train of thought, and you lose any momentum you had on the first task, which costs on the next switch. In an office or on the internet where distractions abound, switching tasks so often can cost hours. A recent study showed that employees who were interrupted while working on a task could take up to 25 minutes to get back to the thing that they started. You've got work that requires your full attention, like researching, writing, or number crunching. Stop juggling and start single tasking. For example, if you've got emails coming in, but you've got to get together these slides for the presentation, shut down your email client, finish the slides first, then attend to the email. You'll get the job done a lot faster than the juggler who switches between the slides and the email constantly. You already know that certain kinds of multitasking is hazardous to your health, like texting while driving or blow drying your hair while you're in the bath. When you're splitting your attention between two tasks, remember the difference between multitasking and juggling. When you have the choice, stop juggling and get your work done faster, one at a time.
I've mentioned this in previous shows, but we are better off arranging our day in smaller pockets of time. I think some people want to multitask because they feel the pressure of waiting too long before starting that other task. So I need to do it together. Other people might fear boredom from working too long, and maybe doing more than one thing will prevent that. So to counter this, I would suggest that you schedule tasks in your life in increments of 30 minutes, not an hour or more, simply 30 minutes. Now, if that seems too long, then try 15 or 20 minutes, but not any less than that and no more than 30 minutes. I believe that 30 minutes is a magic number for many people. You can do less time, but not more time. Now, if the 30-minute rule is right, let's take email as an example. You're going to engage in some email, so commit to doing 30 minutes of email, then stop and switch to a different task. If you need to, set a timer on your phone or on the computer. Now, when I've asked people to actually measure how many minutes a day they use on email, can easily be 100, 200 minutes. That's all in little bits and pieces spread throughout the day. So it turns out you're going to be much more efficient at email. More importantly, you're going to treat your brain better if you do one focused email patch for no more than 30 minutes at a time. Now, again, imagine if I told you I had an app with 100% money back guarantee that would cut your 200 minutes of email processing down to 60 minutes. Would you buy it? I would. I tell you that without a blink, without a hesitation. Well, I have great news for you. I'm giving you that app today for free. Take 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the afternoon, process your email. Turn off your phone, your text, everything but your email. And in 2 segments of 30 minutes, 60 minutes total, you will do more than in 200 minutes scattered throughout the entire day. Also, don't have your computer make noises and things pop up on the screen every time an email arrives. Turn off email notifications. So check it once in the morning, once in the afternoon, or if you don't feel you can do that, then twice in the morning, twice in the afternoon, and see how it goes. Again, these are just suggestions, action steps. Find what works best for you. Obviously, if you have a job that depends on emails, then that's a different story. But if you're like a lot of other people and emails are just an accent to your work, then try this out. I think it will work for you. Number 5, beware of distractions. What I haven't seen a lot of research on is the difference between intentional task and unintentional distractions. As I've mentioned in previous podcasts, the effect of unintentional distractions is devastating. Being interrupted by a text message or email can cost you anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes of focus for just one interruption. I think the most detrimental result of the multitasking idea is that people think they can do a task and the unintentional interruption at the same time. How many of us have been in meetings where it was obvious that someone wasn't fully engaged because they were distracted by their phone? What can you do? Simply turn it off before the task. This is so simple. I don't know why it's so hard for us to learn something so simple. Make technology work for you and refuse to be a slave to it. Okay, so what if you forget? Well, there's 2 options. You can ignore it, or you can excuse yourself. For example, I would much rather have a person say, I'm so sorry. I need to step out for a few minutes and address this issue. And out of respect for you, I don't want to not be fully focused on what you're doing and what you're saying. And then they do that. Now, granted, the person may wonder how important they really are if you step out and you take the call instead. But I think this approach is a lot better than trying to do both at the same time, because I can guarantee you that when you try to do that in a meeting, people notice. Don't fool yourself. You think people don't notice that you're surfing the internet or that you're texting somebody? They do. So don't do it. But here's the key. Be proactive. Make technology work for you, and you can prevent distractions. All you have to do is remember that devices have off switches. They have airplane modes. They have exit buttons. And there is this amazing invention called voicemail. Use it. Limit the flow of information. Yes, you can turn off your cell phone, your BlackBerry, your iPad, your computer, the radio, and most importantly, your TV. Here's a bit of advice. Go topless to meetings. Now, okay, what do I mean by that? Consider something radical. Don't take your laptop. Go topless. No laptops to a meeting. No phones, no tablets to a meeting. Now, I've been doing this lately. I don't always do it, but the other day I did this. I was in a meeting. I intentionally didn't go with anything. And I tell you, I was the only one beside the presenter who didn't have their face buried in their notebooks. It was really sad. If you take notes, consider using a tablet with a stylus for that instead of your computer, which might provide too many temptations for you. In my world today, half of my meetings are by phone, and I still feel this is my last battle in this area, because I'll be honest with you, I will often do other things while I'm on the phone, and I probably don't pay attention to at least 25 to 50% of what goes on in those meetings because I'm busy doing other things instead of focusing. We've got to watch out for those types of things. Number 6, if you must. Okay, so you're still not convinced after everything I've said, and you really want to try to do this. Okay, so if you must, you need to practice on that action so thoroughly that it becomes as automatic as you can make it, thus freeing up the neurons in your head to attend to other matters that you deem more important, those menial aspects of the task. But you must master it first before you attempt this type of multitasking to see if it even works. And again, I want to tell you, based upon research, based upon my own experience, you're going to be better off doing that on physical activities than trying to attempt it on mental ones. Honestly, I believe you're completely wasting time trying to automate anything involving dedicated mental use or creativity, but I honestly wish you luck if you want to try. I think you're going to be a lot more productive keeping singular tasks, short amounts of time, very focused. Number 7, reward yourself. There was a workout program I always loved in the past. Some of you may have heard about it before, called Body for Life. It was great because it allowed a cheat meal or even a cheat day. I don't know about you, but whenever I try to eat better and I think of the word diet, it makes you want to die. Literally, you just don't want to because you feel so depraved. All you think about is, I can't eat this and I can't eat that. And you didn't even know, you didn't even know some of the things you wanted to eat until you couldn't eat them anymore. So what this program did is it said, okay, all you need to do is eat good for 6 days during the week. Eat faithful, be good. And then on that 7th day, eat anything you want. Now, for some people, it could be different, but for me, that worked a lot. It's kind of a psychology thing because you're not depriving yourself of anything, you're just delaying it. And the interesting thing is this, during the first month, I'm taking a cheat day. Woo, man, it's great. Where's the Krispy Kreme? Oh man, let's go for it. But then after a few months, I realized that the cheat day makes me kind of feel bad because I'm eating so good 6 days of the week. And I eat all this junk on one day, and it takes me a day or two to purge it out of my body. So then instead, I start doing just a cheat meal and eating good. During 6 days of the week, I'm eating good. One day, I eat anything I want. I am nearly eating 90% of the time healthy. That is a lot. And then when I reduce it down to a cheat meal only, one time a week, then I'm eating good like 98% of the time. This is a huge way to live your life. It makes you feel so much better. You don't feel so deprived. It isn't that you can't have it. No, I can have it. It's just when I have it. Now, apply the same idea here. If you feel you struggle with the temptation to multitask, especially if your temptation is to multitask for things that don't really apply to your job, like emails and texting and Facebook and things like that. Reward yourself for a stretch of productivity with some type of social or collaborative activity like chatting with your friends or responding to emails. I do this now. For example, if I have a task that is overwhelming to the point that I want to do other things at the same time, that coping mechanism that we talked about earlier, just to try to relieve some of that stress, what I will do is to use my 30-minute rule that I told you earlier. Dedicated, focused work. I know that it's not 4 hours of straight work. No, it's just 30 minutes of focus. Then after 30 minutes, I'll possibly reward myself if I did it. If I really focus on 30 minutes, I reward myself by letting me check my favorite guitar page for 5 or 10 minutes or something like that. Now, lately, I've also been intentionally taking a walk outside for 10 minutes 2 times a day in the morning and in the afternoon. I've been shocked how this also helps my focus and mood. I mean, shocked, because I wouldn't think something like that would have helped any, but it does. Or here's where I will use my physical multitasking. I will have ignored my text, and then I go out for a walk, and then I look through my text while I'm on my break walking. So I'm taking a break, I'm exercising, I'm getting some oxygen, and I'm texting all together. So then I return to a very focused, singular task for optimal productivity and efficiency. Now, you try that as well. Try these different action steps. Let me know how they work for you. Well, that wraps up this episode on the myth of multitasking. Try out some of these action steps. If you find out anything that works for you that I didn't mention, I would love to know about it. I honestly would. You can let me know at firstThingsProductivity.com/07. As always, please consider leaving me a rating and comment on iTunes or in other areas that you may be listening to me. That helps me greatly in letting others know about the show. And brand new this week, I set up a voicemail feature on my website. So if you would like to leave me a voicemail with your comments or questions, please do so. Once I actually start getting in a stream of questions or comments, I will start playing some of them on the show. And in the future, I will even start announcing ahead of time topics I will be covering so that you can actually ask me questions before the podcast. Until next time, remember this. If you chase 2 rabbits, you will not catch either one of them. Abandon multitasking for the more productive practice of single tasking. Cut your work time by almost half and enjoy greater freedom and efficiency in the process. Embrace today with passion and intention, and don't die with your music still inside you.